Rain slammed against the windshield in relentless waves, the wipers squealing as they fought to keep up. Thunder rumbled low and ominous above the streets of Boulder, Colorado, where early spring storms often came without warning. 4-year-old Eli Parker pressed his face against the cool window of his dad's aging Subaru. Eyes wide as streaks of lightning lit up the sky like cracks in the universe. "Are we almost home, Daddy?" he asked softly, his breath fogging up the glass. Jason Parker's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles pale under the strain of a 12-hour shift pouring concrete. His shoulders ached, and his eyelids were heavy, but the storm had jolted him into full alertness. "Just a few more blocks, buddy," he said, forcing a calm tone. "Why don't you count the flashes until we get to the driveway?" Eli nodded, curling his fingers around the plush tail of his stuffed fox. "One," he whispered, as a bolt lit up the sky. Jason allowed himself a brief glance at the rearview mirror. Despite the storm, the sight of his son's little face, so earnest, so full of wonder, brought a small flicker of warmth to his chest. Since Emily passed away 8 months ago, life had become about surviving one day at a time. Some days, Jason wasn't sure who was holding them together, himself or Eli. As they turned onto Pine Hollow Lane, the road shimmered with standing water. Overflowing gutters spilled tiny rivers along the curbs, and street lamps cast eerie reflections on the slick asphalt. The familiar street, usually peaceful and full of chirping birds, now felt like the set of a disaster movie. "3," Eli called out. Then, with sudden urgency, "Daddy, stop! Stop!" Jason slammed the brakes. The car skidded slightly before halting in front of their neighbor's driveway. His heart jumped. "What? Are you okay?" But Eli wasn't looking at him. He was staring out his window, eyes fixed on something in the alley between 2 houses. "I saw something move," he whispered, voice trembling. Jason followed his gaze. At first, he saw only the rain and shadows, but then a flash of lightning revealed something metallic near the fence line. A crate? A broken trash can? Probably just junk washed up, Jason muttered. "No," Eli said firmly. "Something's in there. It moved." Jason hesitated. Every muscle in his body begged for dry clothes, warmth, and dinner. But something about Eli's voice stopped him. It wasn't just fear. It was certainty. "Okay," he said finally, pulling over. "But you stay in the car, Eli. Promise me." Eli nodded solemnly, eyes never leaving the alley. Jason grabbed the flashlight from the glove box and opened the door. Rain punched into him like cold fists. With a deep breath, he stepped into the floodwater and started toward the alley, unaware that what he was about to find would change both their lives forever. Jason's boots splashed through ankle-deep water as he made his way toward the alley, the flashlight beam slicing weakly through the sheets of rain. His clothes were soaked within seconds, and the wind howled around the narrow space between the houses. As he drew closer, the shape took form. A rusted metal crate, partially lodged between a leaning fence and a pile of soggy cardboard. He almost turned back. Then, a movement inside caught the light. Jason froze. There, barely visible through the bars, lay a large dog, soaked, motionless, its fur slicked to its body. As he shifted the flashlight, the dog stirred. A German shepherd. Its ribs were showing, its eyes dull and distant. One leg lay twisted beneath it at an awkward angle. "Jesus!" Jason muttered under his breath. The crate was half submerged, water already lapping at the dog's belly. It wouldn't be long before it had to struggle just to keep its head above the rising waterline. Jason knelt and yanked at the door, but it didn't budge. A rusted padlock held it shut. He swore under his breath and looked back toward the street. Through the rain, he could see Eli's tiny face pressed to the window, watching. Jason turned back. "Hang in there, girl," he said, louder than the rain. Gripping the padlock, he gave it a few hard tugs, but it was solid. No way he was getting it open without tools. He looked around frantically. A brick lay loose beside the alley wall. He grabbed it, stood, and smashed it against the lock once, twice. The sound echoed like gunshots in the storm, but the lock held fast. A soft whimper came from inside the crate. It wasn't fear, it was resignation. Jason's jaw tightened. He raised the brick again when he heard a voice behind him. "Daddy!" He spun around. Eli! There, standing at the mouth of the alley, drenched from head to toe in his dinosaur rain boots and bright yellow coat, was Eli. Jason's heart leapt into his throat. "I told you to stay in the car. I had to help," Eli said, stepping closer. "She's scared." Jason moved to block him from the crate. "This dog could be dangerous, Eli. She's hurt." But Eli just looked past him and dropped to his knees beside the crate. "Hi," he whispered to the dog. "I'm Eli. We're gonna help you." To Jason's astonishment, the dog lifted its head, just barely, and locked eyes with Eli. No growl, no fear, just connection. Something passed between them in that moment. Something unspoken and powerful. Jason stared at his son, then back at the dog. The storm raged on around them, but in that narrow alley, a different kind of storm was taking shape, one that would carry them into the most unexpected chapter of their lives. Jason had always considered himself a man of logic, a builder by trade, someone who understood the value of planning and practicality. But as he stood soaked to the bone in the alley, watching his 4-year-old son reach through the bars of a rusted crate to gently touch a half-drowned German shepherd, logic took a back seat to instinct. "Eli, be careful," Jason warned, his voice strained. But the dog didn't snarl or flinch. Instead, she leaned weakly into Eli's touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a second as if comforted by his small hand. "She's not mean, Daddy," Eli whispered. "She's just tired." Jason swallowed hard. The rain hadn't let up. It poured down heavier now, thunder rumbling overhead, water rising steadily around their feet. The dog's crate was no longer half submerged. It was dangerously close to flooding. He crouched beside Eli. "Okay, we're getting her out. But I need you to stand back." Eli nodded and stepped aside, his rain boots sloshing in the puddles. Jason picked up the brick again, his muscles burning from cold and strain. He brought it down hard on the padlock. Once, twice, a third time. On the fourth hit, the metal gave way with a sharp crack. "Yes!" Eli shouted. Jason tossed the broken lock aside and pulled the crate door open. The dog didn't move. She looked at him, confused and wary. "Come on, girl," Jason murmured. "You're free." But the shepherd made no attempt to leave the crate. Her back leg was clearly injured, twisted unnaturally, and every part of her body screamed exhaustion. With a sigh, Jason knelt and gently slid his arms under her. She whimpered but didn't resist. She was lighter than he expected, alarmingly so, all bones and soaked fur. "I've got you," he said softly. Eli was already splashing back toward the car, calling out over his shoulder. "Come on, Daddy. I made the back seat ready." Jason trudged through the flooded alley, holding the limp, trembling body against his chest. When he reached the street, the storm's full fury seemed to press down on them. Eli had opened the car's back door, spreading his own jacket across the seat like a makeshift bed. Jason lowered the dog gently, careful of her injured leg. She let out a soft moan but didn't try to escape. Eli climbed in beside her, one small hand resting protectively on her side. Jason hesitated for a second, then closed the door and ran around to the driver's seat. He turned the engine over and cranked the heat. Through the rearview mirror, he saw Eli lean down to whisper something into the dog's ear. "What did you tell her?" Jason asked, his voice barely audible over the storm. "That she's safe now," Eli said simply, "and that we're going to help her." The drive home was slow and tense. Jason's hands gripped the wheel, his eyes darting between the rain-slicked road and the rearview mirror. In the back seat, Eli kept his hand on the dog's head, gently stroking her soaked fur, whispering little reassurances as if she were a frightened child. They pulled into the driveway of their modest single-story home just as another wave of thunder shook the windows. Jason jumped out and ran to unlock the front door, then sprinted back to the car. Eli had already opened the back door and was crouched beside the dog, shielding her from the rain with his small body. "She's really cold, Daddy," he said. "I know, buddy. Let's get her inside." Jason lifted the dog again. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes remained open, watching him with wary trust. Eli held the door wide, and together they brought her into the house, leaving wet footprints and puddles across the entryway. They laid her down on a towel in the bathroom where it was warm and quiet. Eli knelt beside her, wrapping another towel over her back. What should we call her? Jason was already digging through the cabinet for a first aid kit. Let's wait until we see if she pulls through, okay? Eli frowned. But she's already part of the family. We can't just call her Dog. Jason looked at the pair of them, his son, soaked and determined, and the injured creature who'd somehow found her way into their lives. Okay, he said after a moment. What do you want to name her? Eli paused, then smiled. Hope. Because we didn't give up on her. Jason swallowed the lump in his throat. Hope it is. They worked together, gently drying Hope with towels and checking her for injuries. Her leg was in bad shape, swollen and clearly painful. There were other signs too, missing patches of fur, old scars, and a thinness that spoke of weeks, maybe months, of neglect. Jason cleaned a few minor wounds with antiseptic, his hands trembling slightly. This dog had been through hell. When they were done, Eli fetched a blanket and laid it over her. Jason brought a shallow bowl of water, which she sniffed, then drank from slowly. She's drinking, Eli said, hopeful. That means she wants to live, right? Jason nodded. Yeah, it does. The storm outside raged on, but inside the little bathroom there was only warmth and quiet. Hope, for the first time, let out a long breath and rested her head on her paws. Eli curled up next to her on the floor, refusing to leave her side. Jason turned out the light, leaving the door open just a crack. As he walked away, he heard Eli whisper, "You're not alone anymore. We're your people now." Morning broke slowly over Boulder, the storm finally retreating and leaving behind a world washed clean. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in narrow beams, dancing across the hardwood floors of the Parker home. The sound of birds cautiously returning to their morning routines filtered in through slightly cracked windows. Jason had fallen asleep in the armchair, still damp from the night before. His back ached and his neck was stiff, but the moment he opened his eyes, his thoughts snapped to the bathroom. He stood and tiptoed down the hallway. The door was still ajar, just as he'd left it. Inside, the light from the hall illuminated a scene that made his chest tighten. Eli lay curled on a folded towel beside the German Shepherd, his arm draped gently over her side. Hope. The name had stuck in Jason's mind, echoing through the sleepless hours. He hadn't had the heart to tell Eli it was just temporary. Now, looking at them, it didn't feel temporary at all. Hope's eyes opened slowly as he entered. She watched him with calm, tired eyes, her tail thumping faintly against the tile. Not a full wag, but it was something. Jason knelt next to her. "Morning, girl," he whispered. Eli stirred at the sound of his voice, yawning as he sat up and rubbed his eyes. "Is she okay?" Jason nodded. "She made it through the night." "That's a good sign." Eli reached for Hope, who lifted her head to nuzzle his hand. "She likes her name." Jason managed a tired smile. "Seems like she does." They spent the next hour quietly tending to Hope, refilling her water, gently cleaning the edges of her bandaged leg, and setting up a softer bed for her in the living room where she could see both the front door and the hallway. Eli insisted on placing his favorite blanket there and positioned his stuffed fox beside her. "Just in case she gets scared when I'm not home," he explained solemnly. Jason didn't argue. He was starting to realize that Eli understood more about fear and comfort than most kids his age ever should. Later that morning, Jason called the nearest veterinary clinic and explained the situation. They didn't have an open appointment until the next afternoon, but after hearing about Hope's condition, the receptionist squeezed them in for an emergency visit that same day. Jason hung up and looked over at his son, who was gently brushing Hope's fur with an old hairbrush he'd found in the hallway drawer. "We've got her an appointment, buddy. We're taking her to the vet today." Eli's face lit up with both excitement and worry. "They'll help her, right?" Jason hesitated. "They'll do everything they can. We'll get her checked out and see what she needs." Hope didn't know it yet, but her journey toward healing had only just begun. The veterinary clinic was nestled at the edge of town, a modest building with a bright green awning and paw prints painted on the door. As Jason pulled into the small parking lot, he glanced back at the rear seat. Hope lay across a blanket, her eyes half-lidded but alert. Eli sat beside her, holding her paw gently in both of his hands. "You doing okay back there?" Jason asked. Eli nodded. "She's nervous. I told her it's like going to the doctor, but nicer because there are treats." Jason smiled faintly. "Let's hope they have some of those." Inside the clinic, the warm scent of antiseptic and dog shampoo filled the air. A friendly vet tech named Kelly led them straight into an exam room, bypassing the waiting area when she saw Hope's condition. "She looks like she's been through a lot," Kelly said gently, crouching to meet Hope's gaze. "But she's still got fight in her." "She was in a cage in the flood," Eli explained. "We got her out just in time." Kelly's expression softened. "Sounds like she's lucky to have you." A few minutes later, Dr. Thompson entered, a tall woman with calm eyes and a soothing voice. She introduced herself and knelt down beside Hope without hesitation. "Let's take a look at our girl," she said, gently examining Hope's injuries. As she worked, she explained things to Eli in simple terms, answering every question with patience. "She's malnourished," Dr. Thompson said, glancing at Jason. "Severely. But the good news is she's drinking and alert. That means she's fighting." Jason nodded, trying to absorb it all. "What about her leg?" Dr. Thompson's face turned serious as she palpated the swollen joint. "It's an old break that didn't heal right. She's been living with pain for a long time. Surgery could help, but it's complicated and expensive." Jason didn't respond right away. He felt Eli's eyes on him and turned to see his son clutching Hope's paw tighter. "We'll do what we can," Jason said quietly. Before they left, the staff gave Hope a small bowl of soft food and a sample bag of high-calorie kibble. Dr. Thompson prescribed antibiotics, pain meds, and rest, lots of rest. As they were checking out, Kelly handed Eli a treat shaped like a bone. "This one's for the bravest girl in Boulder." Hope took it delicately from Eli's hand, chewing it slowly. It was the first thing she'd eaten all day. Back home, they settled her into her new bed by the window. Eli sat beside her, flipping through a picture book while Hope dozed beside him. Jason watched them from the kitchen, his heart heavy and full all at once. Hope wasn't just a dog they rescued, she was becoming something else entirely. A piece of what they'd lost. A bridge to something they didn't know they still needed. And they had no idea just how much they were about to change each other's lives. Hope's recovery was slow. In the days following their visit to Dr. Thompson, the Parker home shifted to accommodate a new rhythm, one centered around medication schedules, quiet routines, and the steady reawakening of trust. Jason had rearranged the living room to keep Hope close to the heart of the house, where she could watch Eli play and still rest without being disturbed. Her bed sat beside the large front window, bathed in morning light, and from there she could track the world and the boy who had saved her. Eli took his new responsibility seriously. Every morning before preschool, he'd kneel beside her with a water bowl and a few soft words. Every afternoon, the first thing he did after walking through the door was race to her side. "She missed me today, Daddy," he'd declare, and Jason never had the heart to disagree. But despite the warmth growing in their home, the scars Hope carried, inside and out, were deeper than they'd imagined. It became clear by the end of the week that Hope wasn't healing the way Dr. Thompson had hoped. Her appetite remained inconsistent. Some days she ate readily. Others, she barely sniffed her food. Her eyes, once dull with exhaustion, now carried a different weight, alert but distant. A dog trying to figure out if safety was real or just temporary. And then there was the leg. Jason sat on the floor one evening while Eli colored nearby, watching as Hope tried to shift her position. She whimpered softly, her injured hind leg trembling from the effort. Jason moved to help her, placing a cushion under the leg to support it. Her body went still as he touched her. But her eyes didn't close. They watched him, wary but not unkind. "How much pain do you think she's in?" Eli asked from across the room. Jason sighed. "More than she lets on." Eli nodded solemnly and then asked something Jason hadn't expected. "Do you think someone did it to her?" Jason looked up. "Her leg?" Eli clarified, his eyes big and serious. "Do you think a person hurt her?" Jason's mouth went dry. He didn't want to lie, but he also didn't want to give his son one more thing to fear. "I think she had a hard life," he said finally. "Some people don't take care of animals the way they should. But she's not in that place anymore." Eli looked at Hope. "She's in our family now. We won't let anyone hurt her again." Jason swallowed hard, nodding. "That's right." Outside, the last light of day faded behind the mountains. Inside, Hope laid her head on her paws, her eyes fluttering shut as Eli began humming softly. It was the same tune Emily used to sing at bedtime, a quiet melody that always seemed to bring peace. But even as Hope drifted off to sleep, Jason knew something was coming. Her pain was deeper than they could soothe at home, and soon they'd have to face a hard decision. The next morning, Jason made the call. Dr. Thompson listened carefully as he described Hope's symptoms: the erratic appetite, the lack of energy, the persistent pain in her leg. "I think you're right to bring her in again," the vet said gently. "We'll do another full exam. It's possible the leg has worsened, or we're missing something deeper." Jason hung up and glanced toward the living room. Hope was lying in her usual spot, her head resting on Eli's lap as the boy quietly read to her. She looked peaceful, but Jason knew better now. That stillness wasn't comfort. It was endurance. At the clinic that afternoon, Dr. Thompson met them at the door. Hope was alert but trembling, reluctant to leave Eli's side. It took gentle coaxing and Eli's reassuring words before she agreed to walk into the exam room. Jason stayed close as Dr. Thompson examined Hope, feeling every flinch as if it were his own. The vet moved slowly, her hands skilled and kind, but her face grew more serious with each minute. "I want to do some imaging," she said finally. "Her leg may not just be painful, it might be infected." Jason's chest tightened. "Infected?" Dr. Thompson nodded. "Old wounds sometimes trap bacteria deep in the bone. It's rare, but with the swelling, stiffness, and her lack of appetite, we can't rule it out." While Hope was taken for x-rays and blood work, Jason and Eli sat in the waiting room in silence. Eli clutched his stuffed fox to his chest, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. "I don't want her to hurt anymore," he said quietly. "I don't either," Jason replied. "We're doing everything we can." An hour later, Dr. Thompson returned, her expression heavy. "The break healed wrong, as we knew," she began. "But the x-rays show early signs of bone infection. It's not advanced, but it's there." Jason didn't speak. He waited. "If we act quickly, there's a chance we can treat it with antibiotics and rest," Dr. Thompson said. "But realistically, the leg's been compromised for too long. She'll be in pain for the rest of her life without intervention." Eli's voice was a whisper. "What kind of intervention?" Dr. Thompson looked between them. "Surgery. A complex procedure to reset the bone or, if it's too far gone, to remove part of the leg entirely." Eli gasped, his small hands clenching. "Take her leg off?" "It's a last resort," she assured him. "Dogs are incredibly resilient. Many live full lives on 3 legs. But we'll do everything possible to save it first." Jason stared down at the exam room tiles, the weight of the decision pressing hard. Money, time, risk, it all blurred. But then he looked up and saw Hope through the glass window, lying quietly in her crate, her eyes fixed on the doorway where Eli had gone. She wasn't just a rescue dog anymore. She was family, and family fought for each other. The house was quieter than usual after the vet visit. Jason tried to keep things normal, made grilled cheese for dinner, let Eli choose a movie, even pulled out an old board game. But nothing really broke the tension. Hope lay curled on her bed, still recovering from sedation, her eyes heavy-lidded and distant. Eli sat beside her, legs crossed, the stuffed fox tucked under his arm. "She doesn't even want her treat," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jason ruffled his son's hair as he passed behind him. "She's just tired, bud. Let her rest tonight. Tomorrow's a new day." But as he cleaned the kitchen, Jason kept watching them from the doorway. Eli had always been an empathetic kid, but Hope had unlocked something deeper. A fierce loyalty, a protective instinct. He hadn't seen this much light in his son's eyes since before Emily died. The next morning, things were marginally better. Hope drank water and ate a few bites of the soft food Jason set out. Eli celebrated as if she'd won a gold medal. "See? She's fighting." Jason smiled. "She is." Later that day, Jason received an unexpected call. It was from Dr. Thompson's office, but not about more test results. "Mr. Parker, I know things have been overwhelming," Kelly, the vet tech, said, "but there's someone I think your family should meet." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Someone? Not a someone. A dog. Another rescue. He's being fostered by one of our volunteers just a few blocks from you. His name is Scout. About a year old, really sweet, and very calm. He's already neutered, up to date on shots. And, well, we think he could be a good companion for Hope during her recovery." Jason blinked. "Another dog?" I know it sounds like a lot, Kelly said quickly, but dogs often do better healing when they have company. Someone who understands them in a way people can't. Jason hesitated. Their lives had just been turned upside down. Another dog? Then again, hope had shown more spark when Eli was around. Maybe a second dog, one who wasn't injured, could help her feel safer, less alone. Can we meet him first? Jason asked. Absolutely, Kelly replied. The foster family is home tomorrow afternoon. I'll text you the address. When Jason told Eli that evening, the boy's eyes widened. Hope might have a friend? That's the idea, Jason said. But only if it's right. We're just going to meet him. Eli looked at Hope, who was dozing on her bed. She's going to like having someone who speaks her language. Jason smiled, though doubt still lingered in his chest. Their house was already full of change. Could they really take on more? He looked at Hope, thin, battered, but still trying. Still choosing to wake up and eat and trust. Maybe more wasn't a burden. Maybe more was the way forward. The next afternoon, Jason and Eli drove to a quiet residential street on the north side of Boulder. The house was small and cheerful, its front yard lined with tulips and wind chimes that clinked softly in the breeze. A sign on the fence read, "Foster Home. Love has 4 paws." Eli held Jason's hand tightly as they approached the porch. What if Hope doesn't like him? Jason knelt beside him. That's why we're just meeting him today. No pressure, remember? The door opened before they could knock. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a t-shirt that read "Rescue, Love, Repeat" greeted them. You must be the Parkers. I'm Denise. Come on in, Scout's been waiting. Inside, the house was cozy and filled with the comforting scent of vanilla. Scout was lying on a rug near the fireplace. A sandy-colored mixed breed with floppy ears, soulful eyes, and a calm demeanor. He perked up at the sight of visitors but didn't jump or bark. Instead, he trotted over slowly, tail wagging in cautious greeting. Eli crouched down. Hi, Scout. Scout sniffed him once, then gently nudged Eli's arm, his tail thumping with approval. Jason watched the exchange with surprise. There was no fear, no tension, just quiet curiosity and warmth. It reminded him of how Hope had responded to Eli that first night. He's been like this with every kid who's come through here, Denise said. But he's especially gentle, like he knows what pain feels like. Jason glanced at her. Did something happen to him? Denise nodded. Found tied to a fence post behind a gas station. Malnourished, covered in flea bites, but sweet from day one. Scout leaned into Eli now, resting his head on the boy's leg. Jason took a deep breath. Can we bring him by the house? Eli asked. So he and Hope can meet? Denise smiled. Of course. Let's plan for tomorrow. Short visit, no expectations. The next morning, Scout stepped into their living room with cautious curiosity. Hope lifted her head from her bed as he entered. She didn't growl or back away. She simply watched. Scout didn't rush her. He moved slowly, circling at a respectful distance before laying down a few feet away, facing her. It was enough. Hope's ears twitched. Her tail tapped the floor, just once. Jason and Eli exchanged a look. She wants him to stay, Eli said confidently. Hope shifted slightly on her bed, closing the small space between them. It was the start of something fragile and tentative, but real. And as Jason stood there, watching 2 broken creatures begin to heal side by side, he realized something else. Their home wasn't just full of change anymore. It was full of hope. Scout's visit turned into a sleepover. By the second day, he had found his rhythm in the Parker home. He moved quietly, always aware of Hope's space, never pushing or invading. When she limped to her water bowl, he followed at a respectful distance. When she laid down to rest, he found a spot nearby, never too close, but never far either. Jason hadn't expected it to work. He'd worried it would be too much, too fast. But the transformation in Hope was undeniable. Her appetite improved. She was sleeping deeper, without the nervous twitches that had haunted her first week. And when Scout would lay near her and let out a content sigh, she'd mimic the sound, as if learning to relax by example. Eli noticed it too. "Scout makes her feel safe," he said matter-of-factly one evening, while carefully brushing Hope's fur. "He's like her big brother." Jason smiled, watching Scout curl up just a few feet away. They do seem to understand each other. Later that night, after Eli had gone to bed, Jason sat with Dr. Thompson's paperwork spread out across the dining table. He ran his hand over the estimate again: surgery, post-op care, physical therapy. It was more than he'd budgeted for, more than he could cover alone. He glanced toward the living room, where Hope slept peacefully beside Scout. Her breathing was steady. Her tail gave a lazy flick even in sleep. She was worth it. But wanting something and being able to afford it were two different things. Jason sighed and opened his laptop. He'd avoided it for days, not wanting to admit they might need help. But now, with the vet's warning that delaying treatment could make things worse, he had no choice. He opened a fundraising page. Felt strange, typing out their story. Talking about the flood, about Eli's discovery, about Hope's quiet strength. He included pictures. Hope in her crate, Hope curled up on Eli's lap, Scout sitting protectively nearby. With every word, it got easier. And when he clicked publish, a small weight lifted. The next morning, the fundraiser had its first donation, $20, from a name he didn't recognize. A few hours later, another came in, then another. By lunchtime, it had passed $300. When Eli came home from school and saw the page, his eyes widened. "People are helping her?" Jason nodded, a little stunned. "Yeah, buddy, they are." Eli smiled so wide it reached all the way to his ears. "She's going to get her surgery." "I knew it." Jason wasn't so sure yet. But for the first time, the mountain in front of them didn't seem impossible. It just looked like a climb they weren't doing alone. Over the next few days, the fundraiser took on a life of its own. Neighbors began sharing the post. Local businesses donated gift cards as raffle incentives. A small animal rescue group in Denver reposted the story to their followers, praising Eli's compassion and Hope's resilience. Comments poured in from strangers who had never met the Parkers but had seen the image of a quiet boy and his broken dog curled up together and couldn't scroll past. "She reminds me of the dog we rescued during Katrina. Tell Eli he's a hero. I don't have much, but here's $10 for Hope's new beginning." By the end of the week, they'd raised over $3,000. Enough to cover most of the surgery and initial care. Jason stared at the number in disbelief. He wasn't used to asking for help, and certainly not receiving this much of it. Dr. Thompson called on Friday afternoon. "We can schedule her surgery for next Thursday if that still works," she said. "It's sooner than we expected, but with the support you've gotten, and how well she's doing, it might be best not to wait." Jason looked across the room at Hope and Scout, resting together in the afternoon sun. Hope was alert, her eyes following Eli as he built a tower out of plastic bricks nearby. Her tail wagged once when Scout shifted and leaned his head against her shoulder. "She's ready," Jason said. That night, Eli insisted they make a countdown chart for Hope's big day. He decorated it with paw prints, bones, and sparkles, hanging it on the fridge like a calendar full of purpose. Scout got a gold star each day for being a good emotional support dog. In the quiet hours after Eli went to bed, Jason found himself sitting on the floor beside Hope. Her gaze met his, calm and expectant. "You're brave," he whispered, gently rubbing behind her ears. "You've already done the hard part, surviving. Now we're going to fix what the world tried to break." Hope blinked slowly, then leaned into his hand. Scout patted over and laid down beside them. Jason scratched both of their ears and smiled. This wasn't just a story about fixing a leg anymore. It was about healing a home. And in just a few days, everything would change, again. But for once, Jason didn't feel afraid of what came next. The night before Hope's surgery was the kind of night that seemed to stretch forever. Jason tried to keep the evening light and calm. He made Eli's favorite spaghetti, let him choose a movie, Finding Nemo, and even surprised him with microwave popcorn. But beneath it all, A quiet tension hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Eli barely touched his food. Scout paced more than usual. And Hope seemed to know something was coming. She stayed close to Eli, her eyes following him as he moved from room to room. When he finally sat down on the couch, she rested her head on his lap and didn't move again. Jason watched from the kitchen. He could feel his own nerves building, tightening with every passing hour. He'd signed the consent forms, confirmed the surgery time with Dr. Thompson, even arranged time off work. But none of that helped the knot in his chest. Later, after brushing his teeth and pretending to read a chapter of a book he couldn't focus on, Jason checked on Eli one last time. He found his son curled up on the rug beside Hope's bed, wrapped in his sleeping bag. "I want to be the last thing she sees before tomorrow," Eli whispered, eyes open and shining in the dim nightlight. Jason knelt beside him. "You're her person. She knows you're right here. Do you think she's scared?" Jason glanced at Hope. Her breathing was steady, her eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. But even so, there was something different in her gaze tonight. Not fear exactly, something closer to acceptance. "I think she's brave," Jason said. "And I think she trusts us." Eli nodded, rubbing Hope's ear. "We're gonna fix her leg. She's gonna run again. Play fetch with Scout. You'll see." Jason didn't reply. He didn't want to promise more than he could control. But he kissed Eli's forehead and squeezed his shoulder gently. "Try to get some sleep, okay?" Back in his room, Jason lay awake staring at the ceiling. The hours ticked by slowly, measured by the sound of Scout's soft breathing and the occasional whimper from Hope in her sleep. He kept imagining every possibility. What if there were complications? What if the infection had spread? What if... He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Trust the vet. Trust the dog. Trust the kid who believed in both of them. Just as he started to drift off, a soft sound pulled him back. Hope, struggling to stand. Jason hurried to her side. She looked up at him, unsteady but determined. "I know," he whispered. "It's almost time." And it was. Morning would come too fast. By dawn, the Parker household was quietly in motion. Jason packed a bag with Hope's medication, her favorite blanket, and the small stuffed fox Eli insisted she bring with her. Eli dressed without being asked, though he didn't speak much. Even Scout, sensing the shift, stayed close to Hope, pressing his nose to her side gently as if to say goodbye. The ride to the clinic was nearly silent. Jason drove carefully, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on Hope's collar where she lay in the back seat beside Eli. She was alert, her head lifted despite the discomfort, as though she understood this trip was different. Dr. Thompson was waiting for them at the clinic door. Her smile was soft, her tone calm. "We're ready for her." Jason signed the last of the paperwork with a trembling hand. "She'll be under for about 3 hours, the vet explained. "Once the leg is opened, we'll see if the infection is contained. If it is, we can proceed with the repair. If not, we amputate," Jason finished quietly. Dr. Thompson nodded. "But she's strong. And she has you behind her." Eli hugged Hope tightly. "You're going to be okay," he whispered in her ear. "You're the bravest girl in the world." Jason watched as the techs gently lifted her onto the stretcher. Hope didn't fight or flinch. She just looked back at Eli, her eyes locked on his until the doors swung shut behind her. Then came the waiting. They stayed at the clinic, camping out in the quiet corner of the waiting room. Eli read books out loud to Scout, who had curled up at his feet like a guardian. Jason tried to work on his laptop, answering emails, checking in with clients, but his eyes kept drifting to the clock. Minutes dragged into hours. Finally, Dr. Thompson appeared, still in scrubs, her face tired but lit with cautious optimism. "She made it through," she said gently. Jason stood, heart pounding. "The leg? We were able to save it," the vet said. "The infection was localized and caught just in time. We cleaned it out, reinforced the bone with plates, and she's already starting to wake up from anesthesia." Jason exhaled hard, the tension in his chest collapsing all at once. "Can we see her?" Eli asked immediately. "In a little while," Dr. Thompson said. "Let her stabilize first. But she did great. You gave her a second chance." When they finally peeked into the recovery room an hour later, Hope was lying groggily on a soft pad and 4 in her leg, her body wrapped in a clean bandage. She stirred when she heard Eli's voice, and her tail gave the weakest, most beautiful wag Jason had ever seen. She remembered, Eli whispered, grinning through tears. Jason placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his throat thick. The longest night was over. Hope had made it. And so had they. The first few days after surgery were the hardest. Hope came home wrapped in bandages and pain meds, groggy from the anesthesia, her movements stiff and fragile. Jason had rearranged the living room again, moving furniture, laying down blankets, creating a quiet, padded corner where Hope could rest without having to navigate stairs or slippery floors. Eli was quiet the first night. Not withdrawn, just cautious, watchful. He sat near Hope's bed, reading to her in a soft voice, checking the water bowl, glancing at Jason with 100 unspoken questions. She's doing well, Jason reassured him. She just needs time. She's sore and sleepy, but Dr. Thompson said everything looks good. Eli nodded slowly. She's still her, though. I can tell. And she was. Even through the haze of medication, Hope would flick her ears when Eli spoke. When Scout crept into her corner to rest nearby, she shifted slightly toward him. The trust hadn't gone anywhere, it had just paused for healing. By the 3rd day, Hope was starting to eat normally again. Her eyes were clearer. She even managed a small tail wag when Eli brought her a new toy, a plush turtle that squeaked just enough to be interesting but not overwhelming. See? Eli beamed. She likes it. Jason smiled, though he was still calculating her medication schedule in the back of his mind. There were pills for pain, an antibiotic course, and strict instructions for keeping her calm, no running, no stairs, no rough play. Dr. Thompson had emphasized that the next 3 weeks were critical to recovery. To help, Jason set up a daily routine. In the mornings before school, Eli sat with Hope and helped give her medication hidden in pieces of cheese. In the afternoons, Jason guided her through short, supervised walks across the backyard, just a few steps at a time, slowly rebuilding her strength. Scout played the role of quiet guardian. He never strayed far from Hope's side, even as she limped or laid motionless for hours. When she whimpered in her sleep, he nudged her gently. When she moved, he followed. It was as if he had appointed himself her full-time nurse. One evening, Jason caught a moment that stopped him cold. Eli had fallen asleep on the floor beside Hope's bed, his book slipping from his hands. Scout was curled behind him, a warm shield at his back. And Hope, still bandaged and weak, had lifted her head just enough to rest her muzzle on Eli's foot. It was quiet, tender, and so full of trust that Jason felt his throat tighten. Hope wasn't just healing physically. She was healing in every way that mattered. As the days passed, the rhythm of recovery settled into something steady, predictable, even comforting. Hope's strength returned little by little. She began to stand longer, bear weight more evenly on her healing leg, and even wag her tail with more enthusiasm when she heard the front door open. Each small victory felt monumental. Eli kept track of it all in a handmade chart taped to the fridge, Hope's healing tracker. Every new milestone, a full bowl of food eaten, a walk completed without help, a night without a whimper, earned a shiny sticker. The chart was nearly full by the 2nd week. One afternoon, Jason came home from running errands to find Eli in the backyard with Hope and Scout. Hope was lying in the sun, one leg stretched awkwardly in her bandage while Eli sat beside her, gently brushing her fur. Scout lay nearby, his eyes half closed, soaking in the quiet. She made it halfway across the yard today, Eli reported proudly. Didn't even whine? Jason crouched beside them. That's incredible. Hope thumped her tail once against the grass, as if acknowledging the praise. But recovery wasn't without its bumps. On the 15th day, Hope refused to eat again. Her energy dipped. That night, she whimpered more than usual in her sleep, her body twitching from discomfort. Jason stayed up monitoring her temperature and checking the surgical site for any signs of swelling. Is she okay? Eli asked from the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Jason nodded slowly. I think so. Might just be a bad day. We'll check in with Dr. Thompson tomorrow. Eli sat beside Hope, whispering to her like he always did. It's okay to have bad days. We all do. You're still strong. Hope rested her head in his lap, eyes fluttering closed. The vet confirmed that minor setbacks were normal. Healing wasn't a straight line. Still, Jason couldn't help the worry that settled under his ribs like a stone. The responsibility weighed heavier some nights, but it also made every improvement feel like a triumph. By the end of the 3rd week, Dr. Thompson gave the go-ahead for light physical therapy. Just gentle movements to help rebuild muscle and encourage proper alignment. Jason learned how to support Hope's leg during stretches, and Eli helped by cheering her on during each session. "You're doing amazing," he'd say. "Soon you'll be running with Scout." It wasn't just optimism. It was faith. Jason saw it every time Hope stood a little taller. Every time Scout leaned into her side like a silent cheerleader. Every time Eli beamed with pride like Hope was his best friend, his teammate, his everything. And slowly, Jason began to feel something too. Not just relief, but peace. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were rebuilding together. Spring had settled in for good by the time the sky started to shift. The days were longer now. Mornings filled with birdsong and golden light. Hope had graduated from her backyard strolls to slow, leash-led walks down the sidewalk. Her limp was still visible, but it no longer seemed to define her. Each step was steadier, more sure. Neighbors started to notice. Strangers stopped Jason and Eli on their walks. "Is that the dog from the rescue page? She looks incredible. You did right by her." Eli always beamed when people asked. "She's the bravest dog in the world." But even as life felt like it was finally smoothing out, Jason couldn't shake the edge of unease that crept in one Thursday evening. It started small, just a feeling. A parked sedan near the house, engine running, driver sitting still a little too long. Jason noticed it while taking out the trash, and though the car drove off before he could get a good look, the image stuck with him. Then came the phone call. Unknown number. A deep voice. One sentence. "That dog doesn't belong to you." Jason's breath caught. "Who is this?" But the call ended before he could ask again. The next day, the same black sedan was parked across the street when Jason came home from the grocery store. No one inside this time. Just sitting there like a shadow waiting for something to slip. He tried to tell himself it was coincidence. Maybe someone visiting a neighbor. Maybe a teenager watching videos on their lunch break. But the same tight coil in his stomach from the night they found Hope began to pull again. That night, Jason checked every lock twice. He moved Hope's bed farther from the front windows. He slept lighter than he had in weeks, one ear tuned for movement, the other for silence. The next morning, Scout barked sharply at the back door, an alert Jason had come to trust. When he stepped out, he found the side gate ajar. Not wide open. Just nudged, like someone had tested it. Jason stared at the latch, then slowly closed it, securing the lock with shaking fingers. He called the police that afternoon, not to file a report, just to let them know. A courtesy, he told himself. But when he turned to tell Eli, he stopped short. His son was on the floor beside Hope, holding her gently, whispering something into her ear. His face was calm, but his body was tense. As if he, too, sensed the change in the air. "Is everything okay, Dad?" Eli asked, looking up. Jason forced a smile. "Just checking. Everything's fine." But it wasn't. A storm was coming. And it wasn't in the sky. Jason didn't tell Eli about the phone call. Or the car. Or the gate. He didn't want to scare him. Not until he knew more. But that night, he moved Scout's bed closer to the front door and set his phone ringer to max volume before he went to sleep. 2 days passed. The car didn't return. No more calls came. Jason started to think maybe he'd overreacted. Then came Saturday. Jason had just stepped into the backyard with a cup of coffee when he noticed Hope standing frozen in the grass, her eyes locked on the back gate. Scout stood beside her, his fur bristling, ears pinned forward. Jason followed their gaze, and his heart dropped. A man stood just outside the fence line. Stocky build. Ball cap pulled low. He wasn't moving, just staring back at them like he belonged there. Jason dropped the cup. The sound of shattering ceramic snapped the man's attention for a moment, but he didn't run. He didn't speak. Just turned slowly and walked back toward a waiting black sedan. Jason barely registered the car peeling away down the road. He was already dialing the police, his voice clipped and urgent as he reported the trespasser. When the officers arrived, Jason walked them through everything: the phone call, the sedan, the gate, the man that morning. One officer, a woman named Alvarez, took detailed notes while her partner walked the property. "Do you know who might be after the dog?" Alvarez asked. Jason hesitated, then nodded. "When we found her, she was locked in a crate. Abandoned. Starved. Maybe someone wants her back, not for good reasons." "Do you know his name?" "No," Jason said, his jaw tight. "But Hope does. She saw him. And she froze like he was a ghost." Alvarez's face grew serious. "We'll increase patrols in the neighborhood. You should consider installing a security camera. If he comes back, we need footage. And you need to keep her inside. No exceptions." Jason nodded. Eli was quiet for most of the afternoon. Jason didn't tell him everything, but Eli had seen the patrol car and heard enough. That evening, as Jason secured every door and window, he heard Eli whispering to Hope. I won't let him take you, Eli said softly, his hands gently gripping the sides of her face. I don't care who he is. You're ours now. Jason stood in the doorway, watching them, his heart aching with both pride and fear. The threat was no longer theoretical. It was real. And though Hope had survived one storm, another had come looking for her. This time, it wasn't just Hope's safety at stake. It was their family. Jason didn't sleep much that week. The house was quiet at night, too quiet. Every creak, every gust of wind outside made his muscles tense. He started sleeping on the couch, Scout curled up at his feet, the front door just a few steps away. He'd installed a motion-activated camera the day after the backyard incident. He also bought an extra lock for the side gate and a solar light for the backyard. None of it felt like enough. Hope stayed close to Eli during the day. She followed him from room to room, her body no longer stiff with pain but with something harder to define, vigilance. She knew. Jason could see it in her eyes. On Wednesday afternoon, Officer Alvarez called. We found the man, she said. His name is Ray Mathers. He has a history, dogfighting charges, animal neglect, illegal breeding. Your dog Hope was part of one of his seizure cases from last year. He likely tried to retrieve her after she escaped the shelter. Jason's grip tightened around the phone. Can he legally claim her? No, Alvarez said firmly. She was abandoned and never reclaimed through proper channels. And with the medical documentation and adoption records you've provided, you're fully protected. But he might not care what's legal. Jason closed his eyes. So what now? We're pressing charges for trespassing, Alvarez continued. And there's a restraining order in the works. But it hasn't been served yet. Just keep your guard up. That night, Jason told Eli everything. He didn't want to lie, not when things were getting serious. Eli sat on the edge of his bed, silent, processing. So, that man hurt Hope before? He asked quietly. Jason nodded. That's why she's scared of him. Eli looked down at his lap. He doesn't get her back. No, Jason said. He doesn't. Later, as Jason double-checked the locks for the third time, Hope stood at the window. Her ears twitched. Her tail was still. Scout stood beside her, his nose pressed to the glass. And then the motion camera alert buzzed on Jason's phone. A man stood just outside the gate. Jason rushed out the front door, heart pounding. Hey, he shouted. You need to leave now. The man, Ray, turned slowly. Even in the low light, Jason recognized him. That dog is mine, Ray said calmly. You don't understand what she's worth. She's not property, Jason snapped. And she's not yours. Ray's eyes narrowed. She won't protect you. Not from me. Jason stepped forward, rage overtaking fear. She doesn't have to. I will. From the shadows, a low growl rumbled. It wasn't Scout. It was Hope. Hope stepped into the porch light, her body tense but steady. She stood slightly ahead of Jason now, between him and Ray, her lip curled just enough to reveal a line of teeth. She didn't bark. She didn't lunge. She just stood her ground, silent, firm, fearless. Ray took one look at her and froze. Jason could see it, the shift in power. The man who once held her in a cage now faced a dog no longer broken, no longer silent. She wasn't just healed, she was protected, and she was no longer his. I'm calling the police, Jason said, pulling out his phone. Get off my property. Ray didn't move at first. He seemed torn between retreat and something darker. But then Scout growled too, stepping up beside Hope. That did it. Ray backed away, muttering something under his breath, and vanished into the shadows. Jason didn't take a breath until he heard a car peel away down the street. Officer Alvarez was at the house within 10 minutes. You did everything right, she said after reviewing the footage and taking Jason's statement. We'll issue an emergency protection order tonight. And based on this confrontation, he's done. He crossed the line. Eli didn't say much when Jason told him the next morning. He just walked over to Hope, put both hands on her face, and said, You're safe now. Forever. The restraining order was granted the same day. Ray Mathers was arrested later that week, violating parole, trespassing, intent to intimidate. He wouldn't be bothering them again. But the scars of that night didn't fade so easily. Jason noticed Eli checking the locks without being asked. Scout didn't sleep as soundly. Hope stood by the window more often, her eyes scanning the yard, not with fear, but duty. One night, Jason found Eli drawing at the kitchen table. The picture was simple, Hope, Scout, and Eli standing in front of their house. The house was glowing. The sky was clear. In big block letters across the top, Eli had written, Home is who you protect. Jason taped the picture to the fridge. Later, as he locked the doors, he looked out at the backyard and saw Hope resting near the gate, Scout lying beside her. They weren't waiting for danger. They were standing guard over everything they'd fought for. And in the safety of that quiet night, Jason finally let himself believe they were going to be okay. In the weeks that followed Ray Mather's arrest, the air around the Parker house gradually shifted. The tension that had wrapped itself around every doorknob, every window lock, began to loosen. Hope walked taller now, not just physically but with a quiet certainty. She no longer hovered behind Jason or Eli during their walks. Instead, she walked beside them, her limp still present but far less pronounced, her head held high. The neighborhood knew her story by then. People waved. Kids asked to pet her. Scouts soaked in the attention too, happy to share his spotlight with the dog who'd become more than just a rescue. She was a survivor. Jason started to feel the heaviness lift from their home. He caught Eli laughing more often. Homework got done without reminders. Hope started sleeping on her side again, deeply enough to twitch during dreams, not from pain or fear, but rest. Still, some things lingered in silence. One afternoon, Eli brought a school flyer home. It was for Community Animal Heroes Day, an event the local Humane Society was hosting. There would be booths, games, and even a spotlight for adoption success stories. Eli thrust the paper into Jason's hands with wide, hopeful eyes. "Can we take Hope?" he asked. "They want people to share rescue stories. And I want everyone to know how strong she is." Jason hesitated. The idea of standing in front of strangers retelling something so raw made his chest tighten. But the look on Eli's face, the same quiet resolve that once pulled Jason into a flood to save a dog, left no room for doubt. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think we should." Eli's grin was instant. "Can I speak too?" Jason smiled. "I was kind of counting on it." They spent the week helping Eli craft what he wanted to say. Jason offered help, but Eli insisted on doing most of it himself. When he read it aloud, standing in the living room with Hope sitting beside him, Jason felt a lump rise in his throat. She was hurt and scared, and someone gave up on her, Eli read. But she didn't give up. She kept going. "She trusted me. And now she's home. And she's not just a dog. She's my family." Hope laid her head on Eli's foot at that moment, perfectly timed, like she knew. Jason didn't have a single word of critique. Saturday arrived bright and sunny. The park was filled with families, tents, dogs of all shapes and sizes. Hope wore a bandana that read, "Adopted and Awesome," and Eli wore one that matched, "Rescued is my favorite breed." Jason watched his son hold Hope's leash with a quiet pride that melted every hesitation he'd had about attending. But what neither of them knew was that someone else had been invited that day too. And her presence would change everything. Jason had just stepped away to grab drinks when he saw her. She was standing near the main stage, talking to one of the volunteers. Mid-30s, light brown hair pulled back into a loose braid, dressed in jeans and a faded rescue organization t-shirt. She looked familiar, but it wasn't until she turned and locked eyes with Hope that Jason felt the air shift. Hope froze. Her ears perked. Her body went still, not in fear, but in something else. Recognition. Then, slowly, her tail began to wag. Jason followed her gaze and watched as the woman took a hesitant step forward. She crouched low, not calling out, just watching. Hope moved first. No hesitation. She crossed the space between them and pressed her face into the woman's hands. Jason stood speechless. The woman looked up at him, tears already in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't expect to see her here. I didn't even know if she'd still be alive." Jason's voice caught. "You know her?" She nodded. "I was a volunteer at the shelter that seized her from Mathers. I used to sit with her every day. She was terrified back then, broken. But she always let me touch her. She'd nudge my hand like she wanted to believe I could fix everything." Eli arrived just then, drink in hand, pausing when he saw Hope nuzzling the stranger like she was an old friend. Jason put a hand on his son's shoulder. "Eli, this is someone who helped Hope a long time ago." The woman smiled gently at him. "Hi, Eli. I'm Brooke." Eli knelt beside Hope, scratching behind her ears. "Did she know you?" Brooke's voice wavered. "I think she remembered." For the next hour, they talked. Brooke told them what she knew, how Hope had been pulled from a yard with a dozen other dogs, how she'd been one of the quietest but never aggressive. "I always said she was the bravest dog I'd ever met," Brooke said. "Even when no one believed she'd come back from it." Jason listened, heart swelling with a strange mix of sorrow and gratitude. Hearing about Hope's past didn't break him, it filled in the blanks. It explained the nightmares, the fear of crates, the way she clung to Eli like a lifeline. When Eli finally stepped onto the stage to read his speech, he paused halfway through, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "She had a whole life before us," he said. "But we're her future now. And I think that's what matters most." The crowd clapped. Hope barked once, softly, like she was applauding too. "And Jason?" He stood there with Scout at his side, watching his son and their dog standing proudly in the sun, feeling something he hadn't in a long time. Complete. Summer settled over the town like a soft blanket, warm days, slow evenings, and the kind of quiet that made everything feel just a little more possible. Hope had officially finished her final round of physical therapy. Dr. Patel declared her a miracle on 4 legs, and while her gait still carried a slight limp, it no longer held her back. She could run now, really run, chasing Scout through the backyard, ears flopping, tail high. Jason built a new gate for the yard. Reinforced. Secure. But the truth was, they didn't feel afraid anymore. The threat was gone, and what remained was something stronger than fear, a foundation. One Sunday morning, Eli woke early and padded into the kitchen where Jason was sipping coffee and reviewing invoices. "Can we go somewhere today?" Eli asked, sliding into the seat across from him. Jason looked up. "Where to?" Eli hesitated, then reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded brochure. The cover read, Sunrise Hills Memorial Park. Jason's breath caught. He hadn't been there in months. "I want to bring Hope," Eli said gently. "To meet Mom." Jason didn't answer right away. He set his mug down, then reached across the table and squeezed Eli's hand. "Yeah," he said, voice quiet. "We should do that." They packed up a small bag, water, a bowl, a blanket, and loaded Hope and Scout into the car. The drive was long and silent, but it wasn't heavy. It felt like something that had been waiting to happen. The cemetery was nearly empty when they arrived. Jason led the way to the headstone nestled beneath an old oak tree. Lisa Parker. Beloved wife. Loving mother. Eli walked ahead, Hope at his side. "She would have liked you," Eli whispered to her. "She liked helping things. She would have helped you." Hope sat beside him, calm and still. Scout lay down in the grass nearby. Jason knelt next to his son, hands resting on his knees, the morning sun warm on their backs. They stayed there a long time. Jason spoke aloud, telling Lisa about Hope. About how they found her. About how Eli had grown stronger, braver. About how they both started smiling more. Then Eli pulled something from his pocket, a small photo. It was the one of the 3 of them, Eli, Hope, and Jason, taken at the adoption event, all of them bathed in sunlight, faces relaxed and full of something rare and real. "I wanted her to have this," Eli said, placing the photo at the base of the stone. "So she knows we're okay." Jason put an arm around his son and held him there in the quiet. Hope stood and moved forward, gently nudging her nose against the cool stone before sitting back down beside them. They didn't say it out loud, but something had shifted. This wasn't just goodbye. It was a beginning. The drive home was quiet, but it wasn't heavy. Jason could feel it, something inside him had unlocked. The weight he'd carried for so long, the unspoken ache of losing Lisa, had found a place to rest. Not disappear. Just settle. That evening, they sat out on the porch together, Jason, Eli, Hope, and Scout. The sun dipped low, painting the yard in soft golds and oranges. Cicadas hummed in the background. A breeze lifted the edge of the porch flag. And for once, the silence didn't beg to be filled. Hope rested her head on Eli's knee, her eyes fluttering closed. Scout was sprawled at Jason's feet, belly to the sky, perfectly content. Jason took a sip of iced tea, then looked at Eli. "You know," he said, "you saved her life that night." Eli looked up, surprised. "You're the one who opened the cage." "Because you told me to stop the car," Jason replied. "Because you saw her when I didn't." Eli was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "She saved me too." Jason's chest tightened. "She saved both of us." They didn't need to say anything more. The truth of it hung between them, solid and shared. Later that week, Jason received a letter in the mail. It was from the county. Inside was a certificate, an official acknowledgement of Hope's status as a rehabilitated and adopted rescue with her new legal name, Hope Parker. Jason held the paper in his hands for a long time. He thought about what it meant. About what names mean. About how family isn't always something you're born into. Sometimes it's built. Sometimes it's fought for. That night, he framed the certificate and hung it beside the photo Eli had given Lisa's headstone. "Hope Parker," Eli said, testing the name out loud. "Sounds perfect." From then on, the name stuck. At the vet. At the park. On her new collar. On the wall of Jason's workshop where he built her a wooden toy box with her name carved across the top. Months passed. Seasons changed. The house no longer felt like it was missing something. It felt lived in. Filled. Whole. And one night, as Jason was tucking Eli into bed, Eli looked up at him with sleepy eyes and asked, "Do you think Mom sent her?" Jason paused, brushing back a strand of hair from his son's forehead. "I don't know," he said softly. "But I do know this. When we found Hope, it was like someone gave us exactly what we needed, exactly when we needed it." Eli smiled. Then maybe that's the same thing. Jason turned off the light, leaving the door open just a crack. In the dim hallway, Hope lay curled up, her body relaxed, her eyes gently watching the room. Jason whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "Welcome home, Hope." And for the first time in a long, long while, everything felt exactly right.